Hello, in this video we're going to look at the area of the course that looks at provision, i.e. what opportunities are provided to people in this country to take part in regular physical activity. Now there's three areas that provide the opportunities to take part in physical activity at sport: the public sector, the private sector and the voluntary sector. And we need to know characteristics and aims and objectives of each one of these, and sometimes how they play against each other a little bit. So the first one, as you can see on this screen, is the public sector. Now that is a picture of a public leisure centre that you might find, or you often find, or you do find in many cities and towns in this country. Now the key thing to know about public sector organisations, if you are ever asked the characteristics, one of the first things that you've got to say is that they are run by local authorities. Don't put the government. That is not how a public sector organisation is run. It is not run by the government. It is run by the local authority, more commonly known as your local council. So that's the correct terminology to use for this. So there's a characteristic of the public sector. Another characteristic is that they are, as you are probably familiar with, pay as you use. Okay, so these aren't based on memberships. These aren't based on monthly or weekly subscriptions. You basically pay as you use them, and with that in mind, they are often relatively, not always, but relatively cheap, because you pay what you can afford. It's not like a private gym where even if you don't use it this month, you are having to pay a monthly subscription. So there's another characteristic of a public sector organisation. Another characteristic is that they are for local community use. They are for use by people who live in that locality. That's why you'll often find them in heavily populated areas. And that's one of the reasons that they exist, is to get the local people surrounding the area an opportunity to take part in regular physical activity. Now, one of the crucial factors about a public sector is that because they are, and I'll just, as a little recap there, local authority or local council, they do get funding from the government. They do get money to run from the government that gets passed down to the local council to fund them. So there is technically no need to make a profit. If you think this is an organisation, this leisure centre, this one that you can see above, will get money from the local council, will get money from the government. They will then charge, as we've said earlier, pay as you use. So they'll have customers coming through the door to pay to use them. So some months, particularly if everyone's concerned about going away for the summer, or January, through till, March, April time when the New Year's resolutions are kicked in, they will get a lot of income from people paying as they use it to come in and burn off Christmas and, get the beach body ready for the summer. But then maybe later on in the year, when it's getting close to Christmas time, people won't use it as much. They won't have as much revenue coming through the door, but that's not too much of a concern for them, because they, as we said, will get some funding or a lot of funding from the local authority, from the local council, so there is no need to make a profit. Don't use the term, don't say that some months they'll work on a profit loss basis, because they're not, they won't make a loss. They will get the funding from the government needed to run that centre efficiently. Okay? Now, finally, one other key characteristic you can say of the public sector is that generally, as a whole, the facilities are not as good as private. Why? Well, you can probably work that out. If you're a member of a private gym, you pay membership fees, monthly subscriptions, that's more money coming in. Like we said, even if you don't use it, you've still got to pay. So that, and they are more expensive, so that money can therefore be used to buy higher standard facilities, whereas the public sector, as we've said, they're relatively cheap. Okay, the pay as you use, they are based on local authority revenue and things like that. A local council is not just going to throw money at a leisure centre when they've also got to run other public sector facilities. So the facilities, as a result, are not as high as private. Okay. So they're the characteristics, okay? Magically make them disappear. What we then might get a question on is, what are the advantages, or what are their aims and objectives? What do they try to provide? Well, as we've kind of already alluded to a little bit, what do they aim to provide? Why are they there? They're there to increase, I'm going to put H and F, health and fitness of local community. That is one of the key reasons that they exist. That is one of the key reasons that these local councils, these local authorities, provide money for public sector. They've got to pay for social workers, they've got to pay for schools, they've got to pay for libraries. So why waste, in inverted commas, money on leisure centres? Well, because they can help improve the health and fitness of the local community, which then takes strain off the health, the local hospitals. And the local doctors, people aren't going in as much with as many medical complaints. So it's there to increase the health and fitness of the local community. Another key advantage that we've already mentioned too is relatively cheap in comparison to the private sector gyms. So, they're more affordable to more people. The final key main advantage of public sector is that they, how can we put this? Put it like this. They bring the community together. People that wouldn't normally interact with each other, people that would just normally walk past each other on the streets, might meet up at the local badminton club in the leisure centre, might take their kids to Saturday or Sunday morning swimming lessons in the local leisure centre, and it brings the community together. So it can, the word that I'm trying to, get there is, it can produce a bit of what we call social integration. People integrate with each other more, they interact with each other more, and it brings the whole community together. So that's the key content on public sector organisation. Move on to private sector. Now you've got a picture there, taken from a private sector gymnasium. Again, they're becoming increasingly more common in and around city centres, but also on the outskirts of cities, particularly on, commuter routes where they know that people are going to be driving from work back home, and there's a gym there because they'll pay to use the gym. What are the key things that we can say about private sector organisations? Okay, now, number one, key thing, it's not that they'll admit to it, they don't have to admit to it, but the key thing you need to be aware of is their number one aim and objective is to make a profit. These are businesses not paid for by councils. These are owned by shareholders, by executives, by businessmen and women. If this company does not make a profit, it goes bust. And if it goes bust, they'll lose their money. So their number one priority is to make a profit. How do they do that? They have membership fees. Okay, alongside monthly subscriptions. Okay, so if you are a member, there's plenty out there, David Lloyd, DW, Exercise for Less, Fitness First, Fitness Flex, places like that. These are all private sector companies. Number one priority is make a profit, and they do that based on membership fees and subscriptions. However, as a result of that, what do you get there? You get high quality facilities. As a result of being members only and subscriptions, they're often viewed as being elitist, i.e. they only attract the people they want to attract, i.e. the people who can afford to join. As a plus side to that though, for the people who do pay their monthly subscriptions and membership fees, they are less crowded. Now that is beneficial to a lot of people because it means they can increase health and fitness even more. If it is less crowded, you can get to those, you can make better use of those facilities. When you go to a public sector gym, sometimes very crowded, scramble to get on the piece of equipment you want, and you sometimes don't get the workout done that you wanted to get done when you went there in the first place. Now, what you've got to be aware of is the wording of the question. These are just some, these are points that are on the mark scheme, that are in the textbooks, that are on the syllabus. If you was to get a question saying what are the advantages and or disadvantages of the private sector, well, one key advantage is that they have high quality facilities. One key advantage is that they are less crowded. That allows you to increase your health and fitness even further. Okay, but if a question comes up about disadvantages, membership fees and subscriptions, which makes them quite expensive, they are elitist, they are not for everyone. So it's a case of taking this information, reading the question carefully and going, right, which bits apply to this question in particular, and putting that theory down. And seeing as we've got a bit of space left at the bottom, there are other key benefits that they have as well. Similar to public sector, there are social benefits. You're meeting like-minded people again who are interested in health and fitness, maybe do the same fitness classes as you, or working, training the same body part as you that particular day. You get to interact with people, you get to talk to them. So there are key social benefits to being a member of a private fitness club, just as there was a public sector one. But to finish off with, I know he made this point 2 or 3 times already, but the key thing, the reason that they exist is to make a profit. They are owned by shareholders. Of course, it's not going to say that on your leaflet when you become a member, or when you're thinking about becoming a member. They're going to tell you about the high quality facilities, the fact that they're not crowded, the fact that you can use this, you can use that, they've got high quality personal trainers, etc., etc. Of course, that's what they provide, but the reason they provide that is to get members paying membership fees, monthly subscriptions, so that they can ultimately generate a profit which lines the pockets of the shareholders. I'm not being a cynic, that is just the way the world works. Finally, the final sector that comes up on the syllabus is the voluntary sector. And as that picture shows you, what is the voluntary sector? This is the one that people struggle with most, and I don't know why, because this is the one that we've probably had most access and most familiarity to. The voluntary sector is all the local clubs, regardless of sport, that we have been members of and joined and played for over a weekend and on evenings since we're little kids. Voluntary sector is pretty much grassroots sport in our local community. Your local football, rugby, netball, hockey, basketball teams, local swimming clubs. Okay, so as soon as I say that, you should have names coming out to you. They are not private gyms, they are not leisure centres, they are the local clubs that the vast majority of us joined as young kids to start when we first, took up our passion for playing a particular sport or certain sports. So to finish on this one, what can we say? Right, well, voluntary sector. Common questions that come up are, what are the characteristics of the voluntary sector? Okay, as you probably know, try not to use volunteers, but it will get run by, we'll put members / volunteers. Okay, and they are often people's mums and dads, aunties and uncles, granddads. They are people in your community who saw a need or a demand for that, or for a local club for that age group in that particular sport, and off the kindness of their own heart said, right, we'll start one up. Maybe had a level 1, level 2 coaching qualifications themselves that they felt like they hadn't used yet. So they're run by members and local volunteers, or the local community. A lot of them are charity based, and with that in mind, as I'm sure you've all done, I've certainly remember doing this as a kid, you need to do fundraising events. These clubs are not getting money from the local authority, so they're not public sector. They are not getting money from shareholders and chief executives because they're just local clubs, so they're not getting money from the private sector. That is why they are voluntary sector, but you need money to run everything. And where do you get that money from? From fundraising events. However, what has been a great thing in our country that is helping a lot of these voluntary sector clubs is you can now get national lottery grants. If you can show to the National Lottery that we are a growing sports club, we do a lot for our local community, and we need this bit of kit or this bit of equipment, or we'd like some money so we could rent this pitch for the next 2 seasons, something like that, then you can apply for and you can get national lottery grants to help fund your club. With that in mind, they are run on what we call a break-even basis. Any profit that is made, any money that is made, is reinvested back into the club. No one gets paid a salary, because I'll keep emphasising it because it's worth pointing. This is voluntary sector. If it's voluntary, no one gets paid a wage. You volunteer to do something, you do not get paid a salary. So again, like I said before, they're run by local people, kindness of their own hearts, want to see, maybe wanting to start a club for their own children and other people's children got involved, which is great. So the money that is made through these fundraising events, through any charity events, through national lottery grants, is reinvested back into the club to pay for kit, to pay for equipment, to pay for transport, to pay for someone to go wash the kit every Sunday following the game so it's ready again for the next weekend. Finally, I'm just going to draw a line down there. Got the characteristics. So, what are the goals of the voluntary sector? Why does the voluntary sector exist? Well, as we've mentioned, its key reason for existence is grassroots participation. Getting young kids, like we can see on this picture here, getting them involved in sport. Your next generation of Olympic champions, World Cup winners, starts on this pitch here. No one can become elite overnight. It takes years and years of practice, and that all starts with your local grassroots clubs. So to provide grassroots opportunities is the number one goal. Okay, what else are we trying to do? We are trying to increase participation. Now, why are we trying to increase participation? It might be for many reasons, but two of the big ones are health and social. A more active person is a healthier person. More children in a local community playing for the same club increases social interaction and, brings that integration element back together again. So that's kind of been a running theme to all three of these sectors, public, private, voluntary sector. They all offer opportunities to get healthy, and they all offer opportunity to socialise with like-minded people. Okay? Why else do they exist? Increase or improve standards. As we've just said, your next generation of Olympic athletes, hockey players, Team GB are here. If you've got more local clubs, that raises the standard of hockey players or football players or basketballers at grassroots level, which then should increase the standard of elite athletes coming out at the top end. So there we have the three sectors. Like I said, when the questions come up on these, you've got to, first priority, number one, which sector is it talking about? Sometimes they like to play two against each other, public versus private versus voluntary, something like that. So identify which sector or which sectors they are talking about, and then look for your keywords. Is this just an explain the advantages of one or the disadvantages of one, or advantages, disadvantages of one in comparison to another? Is it just a case of why do they exist? What are the goals? What are their aims? What are their objectives? So look at the question carefully, break it down and use this content to form your answer.